Thank you for joining us on Earth File. I am Ayola Kasem. It is just a few weeks to COP21 in Paris, and as at the last count, 128 intended nationally determined contributions have been submitted. This is reflecting 155 countries, around 87% of global emissions in 2010 and 88% of global population. Well, many are hoping that within the next few days, Nigeria will submit its INDC. But before we get to Paris, there is the ongoing discussions about who will be the Minister of Environment, or will there be a Ministry of Environment. The attention has also been focused on the importance of this sector and how it can help even in the period of financial crunch. The many opportunities there are in the Environment Ministry are some of the issues today on Earth File. To stay with us. The intended nationally determined contributions were hatched at the 2013 Warsaw Climate Summit. Negotiators seeking to break deadlock in the talks alighted on the idea that rather than take on commitments to cutting emissions, countries should bring forward self-determined contributions for emissions cutting after 2020. The talks in Lima in December last year were tasked with deciding what constitutes a good INDC, but in the end, negotiators were unable to reach agreement and the rules stayed fairly loose. The Lima Accord calls for each party's INDC to represent a progression beyond the current undertaking of that party. The plans don't necessarily have to include an economy-wide target for reducing emissions. They could also include details of policies, targets for reducing emissions from specific sectors, and plans for adapting to climate change. Under the new system, nations submit their individual plans for reducing emissions at the same time as collectively agreeing to limit temperature rise to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. This approach encourages countries to commit to emissions reductions at the national level and to be transparent about what they are prepared to do. But there is a flaw. What if all the plans don't add up to a 2 degrees temperature rise?
We can see that those commitments would lead to a reduction of warming to approximately 2.7 degrees. This is not 2 degrees, but at least this is a step in the right direction. However, we need to be really careful with those commitments because there's nobody who really enforces them. So I think the big challenge will be to get the incentives, the long-term incentives right. So if we look currently into the price structures of the world, we see that there are huge incentives to invest actually in carbon-intensive coal, particularly for those countries who are in need of additional energy and whose energy demand is increasing rapidly due to their development needs. So it will be a huge challenge to combine those development needs and climate change climate change mitigation at the same time, because currently, and I'm not convinced that the INDCs will change that, currently basically there are incentives to invest in carbon-intensive coal, and countries are actually doing that.
In the absence of policies, global warming is expected to reach between 4.1 degrees Celsius and 4.8 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial time by the end of the century. The emissions that drive this warming are often called baseline scenarios and are taken from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 5th Assessment Report Working Group 3. Current policies presently in place around the world are projected to reduce baseline emissions and result in about 3.6 degrees Celsius warming above pre-industrial levels. The unconditional pledges or promises that governments have made, including in submitted INDCs as of 1st of October 2015, will limit warming to about 2.7 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels.
Globally, if the countries are serious as they're claiming they are, I think it's very beneficial. One, in the process of implementing your own INDC, you are forced to put in place a number of policy and practical options that will help you to reduce greenhouse gas. And you are made to see the investment opportunities of doing it right. So it's not like you must reduce your greenhouse gas by, we don't care the way you are reducing. Now we care about how you are going to reduce it. Most of the things that we are pledging in the INDC are the series of policy options that can help the country to advance and at the same time reduce its greenhouse gas emission. Say for instance, if, I don't know what is in, I'm not saying what is in the content, but let's say for instance we recognize the transport sector as a major contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions in Nigeria. And there's a policy that says by 2018, no vehicle will ply our roads with any evidence of smoke. That's a policy. It's not costing the government any money. It's going to cost who? The people. But who also benefit? If we're able to do that, and maybe it's catalytic catalyzers we are going to use, I don't know which methodology, technology is there already, and we are able to fix all our trucks, all these petroleum trucks, all these huge trailers, all these old vehicles, and we fix them. And then what happens to our roads? You can drive at night safely. Because you won't have any truck that is going to emit black smoke that you cannot see your front. If that policy says every keke napep, which means we recognize keke napep as a viable means of transportation in Nigeria, but every keke napep must use gas. As a result of our attempt to fulfill our obligations in INDC, who will benefit?
Limiting warming to the globally agreed goal of holding warming below a 2 degrees Celsius increase above pre-industrial levels in the 21st century means that the emissions of greenhouse gases need to be reduced rapidly in the coming years and decades and brought to zero shortly after mid-century. Vulnerable countries, small island states, and least developed countries have called for warming to be limited to below 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2100.